We took a look at Halo 2 without walking, and what better way to celebrate the incoming Halo Reach for everyone to play on PC and the Master Chief Collection than completing Halo Reach, this time around without walking as well. We're going into this one knowing this will be a much harder challenge than what we had with Halo 2, because at least back in the Halo 2 run, we were able to use the different skulls that gave us movement boosts, but going into Halo Reach, we're really limited to using just what the game gives us. So is it possible to complete Halo Reach without taking a single step? Luke and I jumped in to try to figure it out. Starting things off, there weren't a whole lot of options for us to do. Yeah, we definitely missed the days where we could just throw a grenade and rocket ourselves across the map, and actually when you start off on Winter Contingency, you don't even have any grenades, so we really were stuck right off the get-go of this run. Fortunately, if you die and respawn, you do spawn with one grenade, so slowly we were able to throw grenades at each other, moving inch by inch, then killing each other to respawn, and that was our initial way of moving through this level, and it definitely was a tedious strategy, and it's one that we constantly will have to come back to if we are going to get any further in this game. It's kind of like a really odd version of tethered rock climbing, where you have a partner and you can't get too far separated, because if we got too far separated, we wouldn't be able to kill each other to respawn, and then we would have to revert to last checkpoint, making this much more strategic than we actually thought for just killing each other. The open area of this game literally took forever, but eventually we pushed our way down the hill and we got to the area where we were a little worried about maybe flying off the cliff. We were extra careful about that and didn't have too much of a problem. We still don't know what Cat was doing here though. However, later on in this level, we actually got to a point where we noticed that we were respawning in front of the other person, which was really helpful. Now, this seems to be something that only happens occasionally based on where you are in any level. So this is something that we had to always constantly test for when running through this level and other levels to see if we would maybe respawn in a better location than where we were doing our grenade trick, because at least this way, respawning and moving is much faster than trying to time grenades correctly and trying to lunge yourself forward the best that you can, especially with the awful Halo Reach latency which plagues this game. Also, another thing we had to watch out for was betrayal booting, because that was a thing they added in campaign for some reason, where if you team kill, you can get kicked from the game. So we were really terrified to accidentally press X and have to start this whole thing over again. And also, quick side note that I wanted to inject somewhere in this video before I forgot. Occasionally in the footage, it might look like we're doing some weird sidestepping after throwing a grenade, but actually when a grenade blows up and you're not airborne, a lot of the times the game pushes you, like in the other Halo games, but for Halo Reach, for whatever reason, it does have a walking animation that shows up some of the time. So while it might look like we're taking a couple of side steps, that's not the case. But don't you worry, Luke and I both accused each other of taking steps multiple times because of this animation, and it led to some heated Halo Reach moments because of it. Pretty much we just stuck to switching between the two strategies we had figured out so far, and would stop to kill enemies and clear the way before moving forward, because we have to also be mindful of respawn points and when the game lets you respawn and when the game doesn't let you respawn. But eventually, if you're patient enough, you can make your way all the way to the trucks, and getting in the truck was tedious alone because we're worried about blowing up the trucks or flipping them over, so we had to be really careful, but we finally were able to get to the truck. We drove through the next section of this level, being mindful of enemies and kind of just focused on keeping the truck safe, because who would have thought this would be the most luxurious thing we had so far? Seriously, doing the grenade respawn thing was not the most exciting thing. Eventually, a Falcon comes and picks us up and drops us off at this firefighting area, and honestly, this was one of the harder parts in the level because there's a huge, massive firefight going on, enemies constantly shooting at you, which really limited our ability to do the respawn trick, because if there's enemies nearby, the game won't let you respawn, which means we couldn't push up or get grenades. So we had to really time and decide when we were going to try to push up, because if we killed too many enemies, reinforcements came, where if we didn't kill enough enemies, we wouldn't be able to respawn. We definitely think this could become a major issue later on, but fortunately enough, after a few tries, we did eventually make our way through the door and were able to clear this section of the level, pushing us on to the final section where we have to clear the indoor area. And hallelujah, there is a forklift in this section of the level, which honestly can become a saving grace in this type of of run because the forklift literally made this part so much easier. Sure, there's a lot of really tricky elites at the end that can be a pain, but being able just to drive for a little bit in an indoor section, even with the terrible controls of the forklift, was way better than anything we had done so far. And we got through this level fortunately enough, and we were moving on to level 2. What an interesting experience this had been so far. Fortunately, upon dropping into Oni Sword Base, the second level in the game, you can actually see a forklift ahead of you, giving you signs of optimism as to what's gonna come through this level. We did our grenade trick to get up to the forklift, and I kind of just drove for my life and decided to clear the way and then come back for Luke. We did, however, accidentally blow up our forklift, which was a little bit disappointing, but we were able to use the grenade strategy to get to the target designator, which opened up the next area of the level. This was another tedious section where we just eventually pushed our way up to the warthog, and cat doesn't help you at all. We learned a new strategy for navigating around vehicles, especially warthogs, where I can jump in the turret and then line my backup with where I want my Spartan to go, and in this case I wanted to get in the driver's seat and jump out, and then I was able to actually get in the driver's seat without having to do a close quarters grenade jump and risk losing our warthog altogether. And we had to move quick because cat is ready just to take that warthog and drive it off a cliff. Then I had to go give my real life cat some medicine, so I just kind of let Luke do his own thing, and he actually made some progress while I was gone. I came back just in time to help him out with this switch though. We get to this section where we have to make our way back into the sword base area, and we were really trying to find a way to keep our vehicles because walking isn't fun, so we decided to try to make a ramp out of the Revenant and use the Warthog to drive it over, and somehow the Revenant was the one that got pushed over, so it looks like we're taking that instead. And mind you, if you're playing on the non-MCC version of Halo Reach, this game has so much latency it almost feels like I'm playing on a Google Stadia. It definitely added an extra unnecessary challenge here. We used the Revenant to take out the hunters, which was a little stressful but easy enough, and then we used a forklift to get in the elevator because the door was too small for a Revenant. Then we realized that there was another forklift I could go back and get, so I went and got the second forklift and tried to wedge it in the elevator, which was fun enough, but we did get one of our forklifts stuck behind, but we had one still that we could use, and we worshipped and cared for that forklift with our lives and actually drove it all the way to the top of the level and defended Sword Base with our one single forklift. We were pretty proud of this accomplishment and keeping the forklift with us, especially because a lot of the entranceways are really narrow for this thing. Then we moved on to Nightfall, and this part was more tedious than anything else, but essentially we slowly pushed up along the cliff walls, being careful not to fall into any lower section where we would get split up, but eventually there's a forklift. Actually, there's two forklifts this time, which really help because once we had one of us in the forklift, the other person jumps on top, and then we just head over to the other forklift, and honestly, we played through a big portion of this level just driving forklifts. It was kind of funny, probably not the intentional way to experience this level, but it worked here. I mean, these things are really tricky to drive sometimes, and they're pretty much glass when getting damaged by enemies, and they get stuck indoors easily, but hey, it's better than doing our grenade trick, so we were not going to complain here. We fortunately were able to survive these big boys, but rest in peace my forklift. Fortunately enough, Luke still had his. This level has just a ton of firefights and waiting around, so we just were careful not to lose our forklift. I would make sure to have grenades to respawn on Luke and help kill the extra enemies, and we kind of defended the forklift with our life, and this level was another one that we were able to clear. Then we moved on to Tip of the Spear, and honestly the hardest part is just getting up that hill at the beginning because the angle is really hard for throwing grenades to inch your way up slowly but surely. It did take us a long time to get up to the Warthog, but when we finally did, we just kind of drove around in the Warthog, planning to try to get the Warthog as far as we could, even if it was areas you clearly weren't supposed to have a Warthog. We later got a Wraith, which cleared out some enemies easily, and then we went on a simple Falcon ride, which crashes. I always thought this cutscene was kind of weird, but fortunately enough, right after you crash, there are two jetpacks right in front of you, and we were so happy because this makes navigation so much easier. We were not sure how we were going to do this grenade push all the way up into the tower. It would have been so annoying with all the enemies, but having a jetpack, we're able to just fly, which isn't walking, so we were good here. Next, we're on Long Night of Solace, and this part is awful. The outside part isn't hard per se, it's just tedious and long and repetitive because honestly, we just had to do our grenade jump tricks again and push all the way inside of the building. There were some stairs that were a little bit tricky because if you're not careful, you can fall all the way down, but eventually you get into the spaceship part, which is pretty easy. And after you clear the outer space section, we have the indoor section, and honestly, the early part's really easy with the zero gravity because you can use grenades to really push yourself very far. And oddly enough, even without the zero gravity later on, the indoor sections weren't too hard to navigate, at least not as tedious as that long strip we had earlier in the level. Exodus was next, and because the game starts you out with lower health, we actually died way more often when trying to do the grenade trick, which made this very tedious. And we also had to be really careful not to run out of ammo when killing each other, and if we got too spread out where we couldn't punch each other, which was often, we could get stuck because we wouldn't be able to kill the other player and get more ammo. Another very tedious level. We really wish we had the legendary godlike forklift to help us through this one, but finally we do get to a jetpack part, which makes navigating so much easier when there isn't connection lag. Rest in peace Luke, who had it this time. And then from there we just have a simple falcon ride to the end, and we used a mix of the warthog and jetpack to hit the switches on the guns and complete this level as well. And then we're going on to New Alexandria, and this level completely killed our run. Well, maybe. We ran into one of the biggest problems that we had seen in any no walk run we've done, and honestly, we were not expecting this level to be a challenge at all. We thought it would be tedious at worst, but with all the flying sections, we thought it could be passable. Boy, were we wrong. So as it turns out, we were required to go to the hospital first, which we have to go in to clear a jammer. The problem is, once we got to the hospital, we realized right away we would have a serious problem with respawning because there is an engineer behind a glass wall that we can't kill and essentially gives shields to other enemies that are at a distance. But honestly, the engineer was the biggest problem. Because that engineer was so close, even though we couldn't damage it with the window, we weren't able to actually respawn, and thus we weren't able to make any movement other than getting a couple steps into the room before having our second player locked out in a waiting to respawn screen. Honestly, we were starting to get stumped here because this looked like an actual run killer, which wasn't something we thought we would have happen in Halo Reach of all games. We tried driving the Falcon through the door, but the Falcon's way too big, so we didn't really have any luck there. And we know that there's a jetpack at the end of this building, but we can't get to the end of the building without walking because of the respawn issue. So then our plan was to maybe take the Falcon to a different building and see if maybe we could find a jetpack in another building. However, none of the doors to the other buildings open until you clear your first objective, and they give you the next objective to go to the other building. We honestly were really stumped here, and we didn't know what we could possibly do. So we decided to take a short break from the run and play through this level normally to try to get a little bit of a better idea of what we had in the sandbox to maybe work with here. We did learn that while there is jetpacks at the end of the hospital section, there also are jetpacks inside of Club Herrera, which could maybe be an option to get us to move further. But since those doors are shut at the beginning of the level, we can't go straight into Club Herrera unless, and I guess I kind of pseudo knew this, but I didn't really think about it at the time, this level actually has an RNG generated mission objective order, which means that every time you start up this level, the order of the objectives is randomized. So what we ended up choosing when we returned to the run was to essentially soft reset the level every single time we got the objective from Kat until she gave us Club Herrera first. And honestly, this took a long time for us to get the right roll where we had Club Herrera first. For some reason, it seemed to really favor us either going to the hospital or going to this other building first. But eventually we did get Club Herrera, we flew the Falcon over there, and we were able to push our way in using the grenade trick, fortunately, because the hunters and enemies are more in the center of the building, which meant that we had enough distance to respawn and kill the enemies from afar. After we had most of the enemies cleared out, we were able to do our grenade jump trick once again, push in, get those darn jetpacks, and continue through the level. From there, we were finally able to go to the hospital and clear that section out without a problem, and we were able to actually complete this level after all of that trouble by using the jetpacks from Club Herrera. But honestly, had it not been for the RNG on this level, this would have been the level ender for this run, because honestly, we had exhausted all of the other options options we could possibly think of here. In the next level, our main strategy was just to boost along doing the regular grenade tricks to try to get up all the way around the hill to finally make our way to the Scorpion tank. From there, we were able to drive through majority of the level up until we got back to the sword base area, where we decided to leave the tank behind in favor of jumping in some ghosts. Since a large portion of this level involves us kind of navigating through some tight corridors, the ghosts were obviously the better option than the tank. However, even some of these hallways were a little bit too tight to drive the ghosts through, so we resulted in having to break off the little fins on the ends of the ghosts so we could cram through hallways a little bit easier. Fortunately enough, this strategy worked out really well, especially because Luke was able to drive his way all the way into the elevator section that activates the next cutscene, bringing us to the final firefight area where we have to hold out with the noble team. We slowly made our way all the way down through the frozen area to the front of the base. However, since we can't walk and this was a very time-consuming task, the enemies actually started coming before we were able to even get set up to start fighting them. So while we continued to try to push our way back, knowing that there was both a mongoose and jetpacks that we could use by the base if we could just get close enough, we had to make sure we were careful to kill the enemies around us so we didn't block any of our respawns while trying to move ourselves backwards. A good half of the firefight was just us slowly inching our way to the mongooses, and then after we got the mongooses, we drove over to get jetpacks, and then a good second half of the firefight was us just messing around because we're happy to finally have jetpacks. Nonetheless, while this level was tedious, it was possible to complete without taking a step, and we were moving on to the final level of the game. This level starts us up in a mountain, which is just fantastic. So we had to start by doing our regular grenade tricks, which honestly are so annoying at this point and they take so much time. Fortunately enough, halfway through kind of making some progress with that trick, we were able to do the kill and respawn trick where we respawn just a couple steps further, which is much faster but still tedious nonetheless. We made our way down the cliff, and eventually, after doing this forever, we were able to get up to the mongoose and drive through the section where you're typically supposed to drive the mongoose through. We just drove past all of the enemies in the next area, not worrying about them, and we got to the part where Carter oofs himself. From there, our mongoose despawns, which is really unfortunate, so we're back to the drawing board with trying to move forward. We went back to just the tedious kill and respawn strategy we had done until we get to this large open area, and there are so many enemies literally in every single corner. It's really chaotic. Our strategy was just to kind of hold out and wait for a while and try to kill the enemies and then respawn with more ammo before we actually made an attempt to make our way down the hill. But lo and behold, there was a legendary holy forklift just there in the middle of the battlefield waiting for us. So we're able to use that forklift, and there were actually multiple forklifts in this area along with a drivable truck that we never ended up using, which was really nice for getting through this first section. Fortunately enough, Luke found a ghost he was able to take, and I tried to use a forklift and carry the forklift with me as long as I possibly could, but it blew up, so Luke had the ghost and I just kind of tagged along for the rest of the ride. We made it up further through this level, just slowly making our way inch by inch, navigating the best we could. The hunters were a little stressful, but nothing completely run killing, which was really nice. And then finally we pushed our way into the area where we go into our final firefight, which was pretty exciting, I guess. Luke just kind of hid with the ghost and I couldn't walk, so I just stood up in an area by myself until all the enemies eventually died, so that was fun. Luke was able to kill most of the enemies with the ghost and some help from the awesome Marines, but eventually the Pelican comes in and we were able to drop off Cortana before we would have to make our way back up to take over on the Mac cannon. Now after that, Luke's ghost actually despawns yet again, so we were kind of back to having to do our annoying grenade push all the way back up and have to take out the elites. But then we ran into one of the biggest problems we've run into in this run, and this is at the very end of this level. It's these stairs. These stairs for some reason are so much steeper than any of the other stairs we've had to deal with, and whenever we would try to throw a grenade to bounce ourselves up, we would a lot of the times have a grenade just go completely in a random direction, or we would make some progress and then one bad grenade throw would push us all the way back down the staircase. There were also times where we made our way up to the top of the staircase just to have a phantom that flies by to shoot us with a concussion rifle and launch us back down to the bottom of the steps yet again. We had a random grunt preventing us from respawning for some reason on one of our times. And a couple other times we made it to the top of the stairs, but we didn't make it onto the Mac gun quick enough where we were able to save the day, so the game automatically wipes us, reverting us to the last checkpoint. That one was very frustrating. However, nonetheless, we were able to eventually persevere by trying to do the grenade jump to launch over the little gate line and get straight into the Mac gun as soon as possible. I was able to get up there, and we were able to finally complete this level despite all of the headaches that it caused. And finally, we made it onto Lone Wolf, and this level we knew would be the most difficult level we ever had to face. We just killed ourselves. And that is it. We actually were able to beat Halo Reach without walking, and this one was much harder than Halo 2 because we couldn't just launch ourselves across the map. We had to inch slowly but surely, and this one was possible. It wasn't fun, it was not enjoyable, and the worst thing really about it was the latency issues. That was just the biggest headache through and through, feeling like you have a 5-second delay whenever you're just trying to do a basic thing like jump with a grenade. But we will return to this test again soon. We still have Halo 1 and Halo 3 and other Halos I guess we could also check at some point. So if you're new, be sure to subscribe with notifications on, and we'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.